Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah Show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
You know, they say that the plague was carried by rats, but as time goes on, I'm just absolutely convinced it was children, and historians just felt bad saying that.
My gosh, man. I can count on one hand the amount of times that I was sick between the ages of 16 and 22. And then I had, and actually really even the first 2-3 years I had kids was not a big deal. The second they started preschool, Steve, when my last kid was born, less than 24 hours later, one of my other kids came home from preschool sick and got the 1-day-old baby sick. So, yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Kids, they're like little petri dishes.
They really are. So it's been ripping through our house since last Sunday, and now let's say patient zero has started to get over it, and it's gotten my older son, and I have a little bit of a problem with my throat. So if I sound a little off, or if I have to take a break to cough, I apologize in advance.
I love it. I absolutely love it. All right. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you sticking it out, and being with us to do the show, even though you're fighting the fight. Yeah. With that in mind, we do some feedback.
Let's do it.
Our first email comes in from Fred. Fred writes in and says, "Hey, Noah and Steve, in regards to your discussion of wireless access points and routers, may I offer an open source alternative? The company I worked at closed, and I inherited some of the IT equipment that nobody else wanted. Two of the devices, the types I have, were Ubiquiti Edge Router X routers and several Ubiquiti UAP AC Pro access points. The problem is, there's no way to set up and manage this wireless access point without using a Unify cloud controller or setting up a local Unify network server. Well, according to Ubiquiti, there isn't. The good folks over at OpenWRT have firmware that is compatible with a number of Ubiquiti products, including the Edge Router X and the UAP AC Pro. I installed OpenWRT on both devices, and they work like a charm without the Ubiquiti software or cloud accounts. I've set up multiple wired and wireless networks on different VLANs connected to the Edge Router X networks with all of the guest automation servers, and user network isolations want to be running an open source software. The number one hardware rule in my house is if it's not local, I don't own it. If I don't own it, I don't use it." Fred. So, hey, Fred, you made my night. If this isn't my absolute favorite piece of feedback by way of a new piece of information that came across my radar, it's up there with the top 3 for sure. I have, in fact, I think it was 2-3 episodes, even though I threw an extra R in there, I've been obsessed with the OpenWRT1, which is the piece of hardware designed by actually the SFC in response to, instead of suing companies to get access to hardware to be able to flash OpenWRT on it, they just figured, well, maybe we should just build a router. And they did so, and it's awesome. But the problem is, as Steve correctly pointed out, it doesn't look very nice when you mount that big blue box to the ceiling, and then it doesn't have the spousal approval factor, and that means it can't stay. And I am in this boat. I have UAP AC Pros. They are going to hit end of life at some point. When they do, I don't really want to upgrade them with more Unify things. Additionally, we have a lot of client stuff that is out there running Unify, and there are some places where managed network access points make sense. You know, if you're putting 10, 15 access points per floor in a hotel, and you have 6 floors. It's going to be a real pain to go reprogram those and get them all to balance right and zero handoff and all the things. In my house, I've got 2, I think, and they work just fine. Steve, would you ever consider flashing OpenWRT on your Unify access points.
Yeah, I would actually. I don't know if I would do it anytime soon just because my personal backlog is growing as it is. But, I was going to say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it is kind of broke. But that's the only leverage I have to get Noah to come down and see me. So I might continue having it broken.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, now I understand what the source problem is. It's a ploy for friendship. I understand now.
Well, we do what we have to.
I understand now. Ah, interesting. Well, anyway, Fred, thank you very much. I'd be extraordinarily interested if you could point us towards some documentation that you used. If you have a step-by-step guide that you used, I'd be particularly interested in that. And I am absolutely 100% going to give this a call or a roll. Our next email comes in from Mike. Mike writes in and says, "Hey, Noah and Steve, I'm looking for some advice on a problem I've been trying to sort out. I'm married and we have 3 children." This is outside the scope of the show, Steve. I don't think we can help this guy. It goes on. 5 years old and under. My wife keeps her phone on silent all the time, so getting a hold of her can be somewhat difficult if she left her phone in a different room. Listening to your show, you spoke about having a home phone, and it got my brain thinking. Is there a project that I can use that would host a calendar, photos, to-do list on a screen and give me the ability to make a video call with that screen? I'm thinking I can give whatever the calling platform is to the grandparents so they can call the grandkids whenever they would like. With the use of Home Assistant or something like that, I'm sure I can route the ringing to all the speakers in the house. I'm curious if there's a project put together for this already, like DACboard with a Matrix Jitsi connection. Love the show. Thanks for all you guys do. Best, Mike from New York. So, Steve, I'm going to start with you because you have kind of built something like this. You have a communications hub in your house. Can you tell me the story about the genesis of why you wanted to put a communications hub in your house and what you landed on?
So let's circle back and answer the off the top of my head in terms of what I would do or what this person is asking for. So what Mike is asking for is a little bit different than what we did, but I would say the thing that immediately fits the bill: calendars, photos, to-do list, as well as the ability to call. I'd say that's Nextcloud. Nextcloud has talk, it's got photos, It's got calendar, it's got a to-do, and it's just a web thing. So you don't even have to install an app if you don't want to on your various devices. To answer your question, Noah, we have what we call the comm center, and it's just a computer that's set up with a sound bar and a room mic, and the kids have access to Telegram, in this case, to call their relatives either on video or on voice or what have you. There's a lot more to unpack in this question about things that we've been thinking about. So one of the things that we've been using quite a bit is we've got these Home Assistant voice previews, and we don't use them to control the house. We use them to control the children. We use them as broadcast devices. So when we need to get their attention, I created a Telegram channel, and essentially Home Assistant just reads out whatever's in the Telegram channel. So it's like, Timo, it's time for bed, or stop yelling, or various number of things like that. And that has been very effective for us because then we don't have to yell, or we can be wherever we are. I even see my wife will send reminders to the kids while she's working from work. And I also learned she actually uses Telegram schedule messages as a way to interact with the kids. So she'll oh yeah, I need to remember them at 2:00 to remind them to do this. And she just schedules the message that goes out over Telegram, and then Home Assistant picks that up. I had no idea. I thought she was just on top. Well, she is on top of it. I thought she was interactive at the time. So there's a lot of ways to skin that. In the getting a hold of her can be difficult category, there's a couple of things you could do on that, which is kind of divorced from the question about calendars, photos, and calling the grandparents and stuff like that. I would say a smartphone or similar device smart watch or similar device, like my Garmin watch, for example, allows me to receive messages. I get a canned number of responses that I can put, which for me is just fine. Because if it's my wife saying, "Hey, pick up your phone," that's a pretty effective way for me to know that I have to go find my phone because it's ringing somewhere or something like that. So might consider that. What would you do?
I really like your suggestion of Nextcloud. What he's looking for, Mike is looking for a central hub for his house. And Nextcloud is exactly that. It's a central hub for your house. The only thing I think that it's perhaps missing is this idea of, if they reach out and, can it, set off alarms on the speakers and that sort of thing. That may take a little bit of, I don't know. It might take a little bit of hoops to jump through, but I think it's definitely doable. And as you correctly pointed out, not only does it have Nextcloud Talk, but you can bridge and tie Nextcloud Talk into other things. And so if there's another platform that you're using, you can potentially have Nextcloud Talk be the thing that's on all the devices and then have something else reach into it. The other thing that I might look at, I was just doing some quick Googling to see if something like this existed, and I came across a Nextcloud community post, so I haven't actually tried this or to see if it works, but looking for a SIP or some sort of an SMS fax client for Nextcloud. And I came across a link in Nextcloud apps called SIP Trip Phone, and I'll post it in the Geek Lab, and we'll also have it in the show notes, so you can potentially check that out. But the thing that appeals to me about this is it would mean that you could give the in-laws just a telephone number to call, and it would ring the Nextcloud stuff. Now, the flip side of that, right, is that not necessarily going to be a video call per se. I don't know how important that is to you, but yeah, I think that's the route I would explore. I would at least start with Nextcloud, and I would try to knock it off a list. I think you would struggle to find anything else that is centralized, right? Everything else is going to be endpoint determinate. That is to say, you're going to have separate extensions for the separate things. You're going to have separate accounts signed into the separate things, or you have one account and then all those devices all go off, but that's all it's doing. So I'm with you. I think I would explore the Nextcloud route. Our third email comes in from Charlie. Charlie writes in and says, "Good day, everyone. Unify has released Unify OS Server, which is a self-hostable server for those using Unify equipment." And then he has a link to all of the various things. He says, "Is there any network equipment with open source firmware?" Well, go back and listen to the first email we covered. "Can we trust big popular brands of networking gear without open source firmware and without open source self-hostable controllable software? No. Should we be excluding closed source hardware and closed source software to make contact with the internet?" So here's the way I personally break this down, Steve, and I'm interested in your thoughts as well. I said to myself, if I had a Cisco access point, it would have proprietary software on it that I have no access to, and I could log into it and I could configure the access point. So if Unify sells me the access point and then gives me the software, the closed proprietary software that controls or configures the access point, do I really care if the proprietary software is running on the access point or is running off the access point? And if the configuration is done directly on the access point, if it doesn't, as long as it doesn't require the internet, which Unified devices absolutely don't. I've set plenty of them up on cloud keys that have no connection to the internet. Are we really giving up a whole lot in the way of privacy?
I suppose it goes back to the age-old question of, like, if you run Linux on your computer, but all of the firmware on the computer is proprietary, how far did you get, right? And let's say, Puritan sounds a little too harsh for what I mean, but people who are making the assertion that if you don't know what the hardware is doing, you don't really have the protections that you think you do. And that really relates to what you're talking about, which is essentially proprietary thing running on top of open thing. Is the proprietary firmware really that terrible? I'm not really sure. I mean, I personally have in the past been willing to make that compromise, and I probably will again, because I've just kind of given up as this is one thing that my skills would not get me out of. If I had to do it and it doesn't exist already, I probably couldn't make my own firmware for this stuff. So I just accept the fact that this is one of those things that I just can't do anything about.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you. It just seems like this isn't a hill to die on, so to speak. And as long as I can keep it off the internet, seems good enough for me. Then, I pair that with, if I can start to get to where I can put open source firmware on it, hey, at the end of the day, it was always just a placeholder until something better came along. And so if I can get OpenWRT to work on Unify access points, I'd be way over that. Now, here's the thing I think is kind of funny. So they call it Unify OS. It's not an operating system. It's software that runs atop an operating system. Why is it called Unify OS?
I don't know. Maybe because Cisco called it iOS and everybody's been trying to emulate that ever since.
So the thing I like about this is, if we were to talk about the good sides is I was a little worsies that Unify was eventually going to move the direction of you have to buy all the hardware with us, like they did with their camera thing. And then they went from where you could run it on server grade hardware to using their stupid proprietary thing. And then you couldn't use any other cameras and all the rest of it. So I was a little worried we were going to go that direction. And it seems like we didn't go that direction. It seems like we stayed well away from that. But now we're going down the direction of they're trying to unify. I'm using that term intentionally to get everything all into one place. So in the end, I'll give some props to Unify. I'll say this is a good thing. It's a good thing that the software is available. It's a good thing that you can self-host it. You don't have to buy their hardware. It's a good thing that you can run it in a VM. It's a good thing that it seems like they're letting you do more than just the access points and the networking stuff. They're starting to add some of their other portfolio into it. So in the end, I'm going to call this a win. I think this is really cool that Unify is doing this. And I just think it's weird that they're calling it an operating system. You're going to make an operating system, give me an ISO. If it's just a package I install on my operating system, just call it a Unify platform or, a controller or whatever. But it's not an operating system. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an operating. I don't know if they're using OS in a different terminology, right? Because Unify uses this idea of sites. And so is it like Office site or something like that, right? I have no idea whether OS is meant to be operating system or some other acronym.
Right. 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live at AskNoahShow.com. Our fourth email comes in from Michael. Michael says, "Hey, Noah and Steve, I just listened to episode 453. Thanks so much for your review. I love the story about starting at the basics for troubleshooting a network issue. That's exactly why I wrote the Discovery Project. It pulls LLDP, CDP, and connected ports, ARP tables, MAC tables, etc. They're very useful when getting started with troubleshooting a customer's network. You mentioned certifications in that episode. My GitHub contains repositories for Cisco and Juniper certifications. This Fat Pipe podcast interviewed Cisco recently about DevNet certification, and it sounds like Cisco has listened. The new certs don't do stupid stuff like manual subnetting tasks. The new automation certs," and then he links to it, "the Juniper JCNIA repo," and he links to it, "has information on the Cisco CCNA to Juniper JNCIA program. If you have a CCNA, I highly recommend it. Juniper offers free training and covers 75% of the Pearson exam cost, so you only pay $50. The Juniper DevOps repo," and he links it, "has information on passing the Juniper DevOps certification. The Cisco DevNet Associate certification," and he links to it. "It's not 100% complete because I'm still working on it, but it has links to many Cisco resources that will help you get started. This repo has information on using VS Code for Net DevOps, JSON, and how to use Jinja templates. There's also a cookbook," and he links to it, "that has recipes for common configuration tasks. It's all HP and Aruba at this point, but I plan to add Cisco soon. If you do go down the Cisco path, please read up on EEM. It's amazing what it can do. I had a customer who wanted to know when a port on a specific VLAN went down to the up of the edge switch. I wrote an EEM script that monitored the port, wrote a custom syslog message when a port went from down to up. They used SolarWinds for monitoring, and it would look for the custom syslog message and then set an alert. The repo for the EEM is available here," and he links to it. "As you can tell, I love networking and Linux. You switch me to Linux at scale. with Emma from System 76. I still have my System 76 Gazelle, and it runs Kali. Michael. Michael, we appreciate you listening to the show, probably more than we'll ever really be able to put into words. Thank you so much for sharing these resources with us and everybody else. We really appreciate it. We'll put a link in the show notes. You'll find those at podcast.asknoahshow.com.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of August 3rd, 2025, here's the Linux and open source news. Shotcut 25.07 video editor has introduced speech-to-text model downloading capability. The Linux kernel 6.16 has officially been released, and the GNU Linux Libre 6.16 kernel is also available. In open source hardware news, the Fractal 5 Pro open source 5-axis printer has its own open source slicer. In open source security news, Sonatype's automated malware detection systems uncovered a massive and ongoing infiltration of open source ecosystems by the North Korea-backed Lazarus Group, exposing a chilling truth: open source software is now a central battleground in geopolitical cyber conflicts. Cybersecurity researchers have flagged a previously undocumented Linux backdoor dubbed Plague that has managed to evade detection for over a year. The implant is built as a malicious PAM, a pluggable authentication module, enabling attackers to silently bypass the system authentication and gain persistent SSH access, Nextron system researchers have claimed. And a report has come out about the UNC 2891 bank heist, which used physical ATM backdoors through a Raspberry Pi and Linux forensic evasion techniques. Threat actors have been observed exploiting a now-patched critical SAP NetWeaver flaw to auto-deliver the autocolor backdoor in an attack targeting US-based chemical companies since April of 2025. And the Fedora project has announced that its recent outage of services was due to a DDoS campaign by unknown entities. They state that the DDoS didn't target them directly, but it did target some of their infrastructure. In open source AI news, OpenAI has finally released their open source model, GPT OSS 120B and GPT OSS 20B reasoning models. Zuckerberg has signaled that Meta won't open source all of its superintelligence AI models. Deep Cognito has released Cognito V2, a new family of open source AI models that sharpen their own reasoning skills. And the Agenti framework for agentic AI moves to the Linux Foundation.
So Steve has been playing with a little bit of AI, and as a part of that, we had some questions for him when Atypical, who typically does all of the show notes and gives you all of the timestamps, was unavailable for a week, and that caused Steve to kind of fall down a rabbit hole. So Steve, can you give us a refresher? If nobody has listened to the past things that we've done on AI, where did your self-hosting of AI come from? Like, why did you initially set this thing up?
Well, this thing goes back quite a while. Why did I do it to begin with? Honestly, I think I was just doing it to play around with it. I started with a group at work, and as part of that, I wanted to become more knowledgeable by getting hands-on just general things. While I wasn't using the exact technology we were using at work, a lot of the concepts and terminology stick for me a lot better once I've actually gotten a use case in mind in order to digest the information. So recently, Atypical took a couple of weeks off and went off and had himself a good time dancing in the desert or something like that. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. He just went off for some good refreshment time, and we were looking for how do we do the show notes without him, because he does them live every week. He's listening to us. He not only listens to us beforehand, he also listens to us as the show goes and constructs the notes. And so what I did was I took the format of what he gave us, and I essentially used the audio that we generate and generated an SRT file. So that's essentially like a subtitle file. And I fed that into some local AI and said, hey, generate me some show notes that look like, and then I fed it several of Atypical's really well done show notes, and it spit out something that was pretty decent. I mean, decent enough when we have a gap to fill. And that kind of led me down the idea of one of the things that we're trying to get better at is every year we talk about various things that we recommend for people for holidays, but it's always after the holidays or on the Christmas episode. And that didn't make a lot of sense. So we decided we're going to try and do that early. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be useful if we knew what we had recommended over the time and go grab the links for all of that sort of stuff and know what it was and why we said it? Because one of the things about the show notes that we do is that it always has a link to the product if it's available and the name of it. But oftentimes the show notes are not meant to be a recap of the show. So you're not going to find the context around why we recommended it or what we specifically liked or anything like that. But I wanted to have that information for us because just because we recommended it in the past doesn't mean it's no longer valid. So we're not going to necessarily recommend the same product every year in a row, but I've been helping Noah since I want to say 2018, and Noah's been going back further than that for the show. So there's lots of things that may still be applicable out there that are kind of timeless, like Noah's seat, right? That's not going to age out. So one of the things that was looking at was, how do I do this in a reasonable way? There's pretty close to 500 hours worth of audio, and Atypical has not always been around to do the show notes. And even if he had, 453 episodes worth of going through show notes is a lot of work, and I'm a little bit lazy. So I basically just grabbed all the transcripts from the local AI. So I run some transcription stuff here off of a couple of the GPUs that I bought. If you've listened to the back catalog, you know that I have upgraded to the 5000 series NVIDIA, and I wanted to actually put them to use. And so I set to chugging through and generating all of these transcripts so that I had something to work with.
So tell me a little bit about the script that you use to go through and download all of the episodes, from the standpoint that I think to a lot of people, it is just little W get magic here, a little curl magic there. But, if somebody isn't familiar with that and that they don't have a guide to follow, or they have never used those tools, the concept of, well, I can just have a script that goes out and does this thing for me might be a little foreign. How did you come about that? How did you go about writing that?
So my go-to is Python, just because I've been writing Python for so long. When my very first big boy job in IT, the first session that I had with my manager in terms of review, I asked, what can I do that would make you happy that I could get better at? And he's like, you should learn Perl. And I looked at it and went, nope, I'm not learning this. But I picked up Python instead because the idea was just ways to script things in order to make things easier for yourself. So anyways, I've been doing Python for a long time. And I hacked together like a 70-line script that goes out and essentially it scrapes the website and using a library called Beautiful Soup in order to go get the URL for each MP3. And then it figures out what was the date and the Ask Noah show number itself, like 354 or whatever, and appends those to the file name. And then it just downloads them. So it's a really simple in the concept, right? It's essentially go read the website, get the show notes, get the episode number, get the date, and go grab the MP3, and then spit out a file.
Beautiful Soup. What is Beautiful Soup, and how do you use that?
It's just a Python library that's used for parsing HTML in specific. And in terms of how do you use it, well, we're not going to go into that here. I think that's we're not competing with Coder Radio or anything of that nature.
Well, no. But you go in, you call the library and you say, I want to go through and I want to sort through this HTML and I want to find a very specific thing. You could, I suppose, if you were a masochist, write the necessary regex stuff that in Python directly by hand that would go through and look for a specific thing. Instead, you're handing that off. When you sit down to write a Python script, instead of writing everything from by hand, start to finish, you start by looking at, well, what libraries are out there? What libraries are available? What libraries can I call out that can do some of this work for me? And then I would assume you have some that are just kind of your go-to. So Beautiful Soup comes into play when it's, I want something off of a website.
Yes, exactly. So Beautiful Soup has a lot of things like able to do a find all for specific things like an A tag, like an A reference or a paragraph or any of the standard HTML things. You can just literally do, soup.findAll, open your bracket and say, I want to find the A, or whatever it is. In this case, it's A with an href so that it's got a URL behind it, and look for the MP3 in there. And because our show notes have lots of links in them, specifically, fortunately, so far, we've only ever had one link that has the MP3 file extension inside of it. If you change that on me, Noah, this will break.
Yeah, no, I wanted to, I promise it'll be the same. So you generated this essentially subtitle thing. You have all of the MP3s. You're able to transcribe them, so you have all of the text, and then you could go and pick out specific different aspects of it, so you could ask it particular information. What was the end goal? What did you ultimately want to arrive at?
So I tossed these in Notebook LM because at Red Hat, our corporate AI strategy currently between our own stuff and the model available on the internet is the Google stuff. So we, of course, use our own OpenShift AI stuff, but for this particular task, that was not ideal for what I was trying to do. So the Google AI suite has something called Notebook LM, and you can upload a bunch of documents, up to 300 documents in a single notebook, and then it will churn through those and use that as its data source. So it's not going to search the internet or do any of that sort of stuff. It's just going to look at the files that you have, and you can then ask it specific questions about the things. So when I was showing Noah, I asked it things like, can you tell me what episodes we talked about home automation and give me some context around that, include the date and the episode number in the output. And then it chewed through that stuff, and then it spit out all of the places that we've talked about home automation, which apparently is a lot. And it just gives you a way to kind of interrogate the data. Now, this is not an ad for Notebook LM. In fact, I've had better experiences in some regards in other platforms. But one of the things that is nice is when it reads through, it will cite where it got that information. And if you click on the citation, it will pull up, in this case, the subtitle file and actually highlight all of the lines that it thinks has extracted this information from. And so you can go and verify or get your own context around it. And so that's pretty useful. And so the end goal, to answer your question, I wanted to see what software have we recommended over the years. Like in other shows, they're called picks. Sometimes we just, we seem to be all over the map in terms of what we call the segment, or whether it's called a pick or whether it's just simply a recommendation for a type of software. So I wanted to see what kind of software was out there. I wanted to see what kind of hardware we talked about, and specifically going back to what we mentioned earlier, I wanted to make our buying guide, for lack of a better way of putting it, better and easier for us in the future to refer back to.
So on the other side of this, if you were to set this up from scratch, would you do Notebook LM again? Would you look at Whisper UI? Would you look at Fast Whisper? Would it depend on what hardware you have available? If you were sometimes at the end of a project, if I look back, it's more clear to me what I should have done from the beginning. What say you?
So I ended up using, I think it's called Whisper UI, because the Fast Whisper is in a transition between its current version and the next version. And the latest version is not in a state where the authors decided to produce documentation for how you can run it. And that is very specific choice on his point. And the previous version doesn't support my graphics card. So at any rate, I went out and found a different project in order to just generate the subtitles from all of the audio. I would continue to do that. Would I still use Notebook LM? Well, because it was no cost to me through the work, I probably would use it again. However, I understand that places like OpenAI have custom GPTs that also perform the same function. And while you could do a bunch of this stuff locally, the sheer volume of information that we had because of, 450 plus episodes, I wasn't confident that I would be able to run that on my little desktop GPU that I had here. So I probably still would go out, but I might fork out some cash and try it on like OpenAI and see what these custom GPTs are like.
Are you at liberty to discuss why you're so involved with AI in what you're doing with Red Hat as it relates to ethics?
So I don't think that it's a particularly big secret. As with most companies, we are constantly evaluating new technology, and obviously one of the new technologies, or I don't know if you can call it new anymore. Is it new even if it's 3 or 4 years old? I don't know.
I would say, well, here's the thing. The technology itself is not new. I would tell you that the ramifications, both good and bad, and how we're going to make money with generative, I would say that is still very much a novel thing that we're still exploring and learning about.
So every company, even NVIDIA and all of the other companies that are on the forefront of AI, are still exploring ethical issues and setting out guidelines for their company, and guidelines are fluid. So, for example, currently at Red Hat, if we use a coding assistant to help us generate code, we're supposed to indicate that in the comments in the section that it pardon me, that it helped us with. So we're supposed to put a little comment that said assisted by, whatever, and list the model. And all of these things will evolve over time, because I think we'll get to the point, for example, in that specific case, where I think every developer is going to use AI at some point, and then it will just become redundant. We'll just end up with a whole bunch of lines of code saying, everything was assisted by AI at some point, because whether you as the individual were looking for it, or whether you got an auto-generated suggestion when you're searching the web, almost everything is being funneled through AI anyways. So these things are going to evolve. And as part of that, Red Hat has I suppose a committee, for lack of a better way of putting it, that's called, that is around responsible AI use. And so I happen to ask a lot of challenging questions about ethics. And because of that, I somehow got invited in to join with those conversation. And so I have started to embark on that sort of stuff at work.
I am beyond thrilled. Like, I don't have words to express how thrilled I am that Steve Ovens sits on such a committee. I really am. It gives, in fact, it's no exaggeration, I will sleep better at night knowing that there are people like you that sit on committee. It's a fine balance, Steve, between, technical Luddites are like, oh, it's the newest thing and it's going to end humanity and it's going to cost everybody their job. Okay, that's not helpful to us. On the other side, oh man, no, AI today is the worst it's ever going to be. It's going to be better tomorrow than it was today, and the day after that it's going to be awesome, and it's just going to lead to more automation and amazing things. That's not great either. There's a balance. There's a healthy balance in between. I have seen at a teeny tiny little level, right? We're a teeny tiny little company by comparison. And I have seen, in my experience, how lazy it makes people, right? The focus changes from I'm going to go do a thing to I've stood in the hallway and listened to people say, well, better go open up AI and have it generate me a blah. And if I push back on that at all, like, oh, you can't do, well, just going to use it as an example. I'm just going to get me started, and then I'll use it as a starting point, a launching point. I'm going to use it to get me some ideas, and then and then we ramble one excuse after the other. So there's a balance. There's a balance there. Can it be a productive tool? It absolutely can. Can it help and do things that human beings are either incapable or, in our case, too lazy to do? 100%. There's 0% chance, Steve, that I'm going to go back through the back catalog and try and figure out what we talked about and when. My answer, as arrogant as this is going to sound, you want to know what we talked about in the episode, why don't you go listen to the episode, and then you'll find out what we talk about it when we talk about it. That's how it works. If you don't want that, then by all means, point an AI thing at it, scrape away, and go and publish it. I think that'll be awesome. So I think this is going to be a new tool that we're able to leverage to give people a better experience. Now, what I'm excited about, Steve, you and I are starting to, in the early development process of kind of brainstorming what this looks like, because one of the things we figured out is, we didn't do any of this stuff for the purpose of AI, and so AI struggles a little bit because it's following an organic conversation. But as we kind of found where some of those pitfalls are, we're talking about ways that we could create content in a way that gives AI something to latch onto. Can you tell me a little bit about what that might look like?
So a really good example is, now I'll preface this by saying, if I was a much more involved person in the AI space, I'm sure that there is a way to do this where you feed it the MP3 and you indicate when there's a bumper between segments, what that means. I don't know how to do that. So the way that we're going to work on this problem is, if you want to be able to extract specific information, it has to be able to be translated into text. And so a really good example of this is the Linux Newswire, where the bumper actually says, "This is the Linux Newswire with JT." And then, because that exists, I can actually ask the AI, "Hey, give me a summary of the Linux Newswire from the last 4 weeks." And it can do that because it knows where the start and the end of that segment is because of the actual text bumpers. In comparison, between us being inconsistent and bumpers not meaning anything to AI, and then honestly, we shove things in random spots. Like sometimes they're in the discussion segment, sometimes they're in the feature segment, sometimes we do it in the intro. It's all over the place in terms of when we might shove little bits of information in there. And so it became really hard for me to get it to tell the AI, go get us all of the information about products that we have recommended to people for buying guides. Because it's literally all over the place. In one episode, we did 2 or 3, then we took 2 or 3 phone calls, then we went and did an email, then we came back to the thing, and we split it by 20 minutes. And while in the show notes, thank you, Atypical, we actually have gift buying guide and then gift buying guide continued or something like that by the transcript. That doesn't exist because we weren't audibleizing that. Mm-hmm. So it gets confused and it can be very difficult for it to figure these things out. And so the offshoot of this is we're going to try and make things a little bit easier for anyone who wants to throw a tool at this, or for ourselves in the future, by giving ourselves actual segment cues that can be picked up, I suppose, verbally.
So you hear more bumpers, you understand why, but it'll make it more searchable and shareable, which, again, being searchable, discoverable, and shareable was, kind of the genesis of the program. That's kind of the whole idea, to get the information out there in the ether. So I really appreciate all your work on this, Steve. It's something that I would have never undertaken on my own, but having you is, again, I think I've described it this way before. It's kind of like having your big brother come back up at a street fight.
I struggle with that analogy a little bit. A street fight, maybe some nerd in the corner just doing a different type of your homework for you.
Right.
I take that.
Yeah, there we go. A new kernel is upon us, Linux kernel 6.16. It is now available for download, and it features enhancing hardware support through new and updated drivers, improvements to a file system and networking, and more. So, Steve, you drew my attention to a bug that has been carried forward. Tell me about that.
So I want to start off by saying Wes over at the Jupiter Broadcasting did a much, much better job covering this, mostly because I think he's more interested in this than I am. But ButterFS has had a latent bug that was exposed to users in the 6.16 kernel. So the bug had already existed, but it was kind of hidden and it was harder to access. And with a change in some of the features in ButterFS, what that means is there is now a chance that there's a struggle writing to the journal. If you are completing some sort of task and the power goes out or the kernel crashes or something like that, a video game takes your system out, it is possible that you end up, if you've got ButterFS en route, it is possible you end up having to recover your system in some facility because of a bug. Now, it's not one of those things that it's like you should go running for the hills and swap this out and burn butter to the ground, but it is something that you should be aware of. And if you want more of the technical details.
So the other thing that is in here is the initial support for the Intel Trusted Domain Extension, a technology designed to create hardware-isolated virtual machines known as trusted domains. And that enhances the security by preventing unauthorized access from host systems. So this is going to be really important and really helpful if you're hosting machines up in the cloud, because the idea here being you don't necessarily have to, or maybe you don't want to, trust your provider that their hypervisor can't access the data that's running inside of the VM. So we'll have all of this linked for you. There's a couple of good write-ups. One is in 9to5 Linux and the other is LWN. We'll have both of those linked in the show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Proton is out with an authenticator app. After earning a lot of attention for its strong privacy-focused tools and services like Proton Mail and Proton Pass, Proton Drive, the company is now rolling something out that's super handy. They call it Proton Authenticator. The app does exactly what you would think. It generates a unique six-digit code directly on your device and refreshes it every 30 seconds. Unlike other big names in the space like Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator, the main selling point here is that Proton Authenticator is completely open source. That enables anybody to verify the security claims. It offers end-to-end encryption. It offers encrypted backups. And it gives users the ability and freedom to export their data at any time, which eliminates concerns over vendor lock-in. The app also caters to a variety of user needs that allow for 2FA codes to be synced securely across multiple devices or stored locally on a single device, even offline. Users can further enhance their account or their security through biometric authentication or PIN protection. So, Steve, the thing that got me going with this, or the thing that got me excited is, per their chart, it's the only authenticator app that's open source. It's one of 3 apps that support encrypted sync. It's one of only 2 authenticator apps that have no ads or tracking. And it's one of only 2 authenticator apps that only allow direct export. Thoughts on that?
So I guess I would question the definition of that. So I've been using NT-Auth for a while, and it is open source. It's an open source 2FA, and it's possible there are some features there that the Proton app has that it doesn't. So, for example, the Microsoft Authenticator can authenticate you with a push. So one of my clients requires me to have this. In order to log into the website, I type in my username and password, and then I get a prompt on my phone, if I have the Microsoft Authenticator app open, for my biometrics. And when that happens, the website then is unlocked for me. So if Proton has something like that, because they specifically called out Microsoft Authenticator, then perhaps that's what they're standing on. But if they're talking about just simple 2FA, NT-Auth has 2FA. It is end-to-end encrypted. You can run the NT-Auth backend for yourself. It's out on GitHub. The authors even tell you that you can run it there. I believe it's even in the docs. So it has apps for all the things. This is not an ad for them. I just simply it's open source. It's got an app for all the things, and I'm not exactly sure what the definition that the Proton team was going with when they were saying they're the only ones.
Well, NT-Auth wasn't on their chart. So I think it may be something that perhaps isn't on their radar, but I'll tell you the thing that you pointed out to me that causes me to like NT-Auth a lot more is you can self-host it. And to me, especially when it comes to things like a blocking of logging into a thing, if I can't self-host it, that makes me nervous. It means that in order to get access to a particular service or resource, I have to have access to a particular service or resource, a different one. And that's what's always kind of bothered me about a lot of the 2FA stuff. I like it when it's a hardware thing because it's something I physically have. You can't take it away from me. You can't tell me I can't use it. It can't be unavailable. It can't. But I'm going through a thing right this very moment, right here and right now with my bank, in which they won't let me 2FA into my account, and they want me to come into a branch. And they don't seem to understand that I live in BFE, North Dakota, and there isn't a branch within 5 hours of driving. And so I'm going to have to wait until I go to a client site that has said branch that I can walk into so that I can get them to verify who I am, so that I can add my 2FA thing back so that I can log back into my account. And the problem with the 2FA thing is, without an ability to reset it or destroy it or a backup of it, I feel like I'm kind of handcuffed. And so what appealed to me initially about the Proton Authenticator app, and still does to a degree, is I feel like it is breaking this monopoly of it's got to be on Google or it's got to be on iOS. There's finally some third players. What gives me even more excitement about NT-Auth is you are successfully using this on Graphene OS to avoid having a Google Play services and all of those things tied into your phone.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And I was starting to look at running the self-hosted because NT also has photos, and I was looking at that as an image competitor. I haven't gotten there yet because see my giant list of personal projects being too long, but it hasn't fallen off. It's still there. So I've been a big fan of NT-Auth, actually. Really like it. You know, it's got Flatpak, it's everywhere. And I particularly like that it has a desktop client, which, you know, Google Authenticator kind of did and kind of didn't. Anyways, I really like it. Been a big fan. Are
you self-hosting it or are you paying for the hosted version?
Oh, you don't have to pay for it. Oh. It's just, NT-Auth is just, it's free with your account. And like I said, it's end-to-end encrypted. So if you talk, so I specifically sent them a message and like, hey, how do I pay for this? And they're like, if you want to support us, just sign up for like the NT Photos, which by the way is a pretty generous free plan to begin with. So they're funneling all of their open source development through the NT Photos app.
Wow. That's really cool. Hey, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. And so check out both Proton Authenticator and NT-Auth. We'll have links for both of those in the show notes. The music in our ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. You can find the entire back catalog as well as all of the show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Stay up to date with me with the latest, noahc.us. We're back next week at 6 p.m. Central, asknoahshow.com. Have a good week.